if you're listening to this, please take this as a genuine, heartfelt word of encouragement. You have access to everything you need to achieve anything you want when you know where and how to look. And it doesn't require years of study. When I'm speaking to audiences as a keynote speaker, it happens within 5 minutes, a 5-minute exercise that we do together, and all of a sudden light bulbs go on.
Expanding possibilities, the mindset zone.
I'm your host, Anna Melikian, and before we start with today's show, please remember to visit mindset.zone. Yes, instead of .com, it's .zone. There you can find all the episodes and other amazing resources, all at mindset.zone. Today, our special guest is Paul Daniels. Paul has been an outsider his whole life. Because of that, he became, for many companies, the favorite innovation whisperer. And during his 40-year career, spanning more than 24 industries and 27 countries, Paul has influenced innovation for clients like General Electric, United Healthcare, WebMD, and AT&T. Here we are going to be speaking about how we transform dyslexia into a superpower that everyone can learn from. Welcome to the Mindset Zone, Paul.
Anna, it's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Longtime listener, first-time guest, so I'm excited.
And I'm so excited to be here. We are going to be speaking with dyslexia and even more things, but an interesting thing is that both of us, in different times in our lives, were diagnosed with dyslexia. And even now, when I was reading the bio, I stumbled in the word dyslexia.
Yeah, that's right.
That is part of this journey. And I'm very interested in this conversation to go a little bit deep into how you transform in your own journey that challenge into an amazing learning opportunity and experience.
Yes.
And first of all, I have to give you the congratulations, because I think when this podcast is going to be published, your a book that you are a contributing author should be published too, or almost there. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the book.
Sure. Eric Severson invited me and a few other people to contribute to a book that is one of a series of books that he's published under the title Peak Performance. And this particular peak performance book is called Mindset Tools for Entrepreneurs. And I was fortunate enough to be asked to contribute. And my chapter is called Lessons from the Periphery. I'm excited. It should be out at the end of May. And if you're listening to this and it's after May, I wish I'd have come prepared to tell you the the ISDN number or whatever the number is, but you can find it anywhere books are sold online and in stores.
And I will make sure that a direct link to the book will be under the show notes. So
brilliant.
That way makes it easy for everybody. And you are going to be speaking in the chapter around these, what you call the peripheral thinking. Yeah. That is this concept that you've been developing for a long time, correct?
That's correct. And so in the chapter itself, I take you more on a journey than a lesson. And it is one experience I encountered many years ago. I think it was 1996 or 7 that I relive telling the story. And this was before I had formalized peripheral thinking. It was simply the way I thought at that time. And it's certainly come a long way since then.
Can you tell us just a little bit, whet our appetite a little bit?
Sure. So The chapter begins something like this: $150 million. I stared at the number. I blinked a few times to make sure I was seeing it right. No, this can't be correct. 150 million? No, it must be a typo. I go down to the president's office and he confirms, yes, 150 million. This is 10 times the number that I was assigned the year before. And it's 3 times larger than our global company has ever acquired in a single year. Now it's November, and I have 2 months to prepare to achieve something that's never been done before in our company by a factor of 3, and certainly not for my North American team by a factor of 10. I need to think differently. I need to look at this in a different way. And I need to see the opportunities instead of the obstacles. So how can I do that?
Love it, love it, love it. So, and this now is what you are helping other organizations to do, is based on these principles and experiences, how you can help people through this peripheral thinking, really achieving much more than they ever thought that is possible.
Absolutely. If you're listening to this, please take this as a genuine, heartfelt word of encouragement. You have access to everything you need to achieve anything you want when you know where and how to look. And it doesn't require years of study. When I'm speaking to audiences as a keynote speaker, it happens within 5 minutes, a 5-minute exercise that we do together, and all of a sudden light bulbs go on. And it's an exciting journey, and I love sharing it because it does change the trajectory of both companies and people in a positive way, where they start to see the world the way you and I, Anna, see it, as filled with opportunities and choices and paths and answers instead of the opposite.
And this comes along, going back to the dyslexia, that you, when you were growing up, you didn't know that you had dyslexia, correct?
That's right. I was 40 years old when I was diagnosed with dyslexia.
Wow. But when you were growing up, you had the challenge that somebody with dyslexia faces in school, that prevents you to succeed with the criteria that typically people will evaluate as the good student.
Correct. Yes, I was labeled both privately and publicly as slow, stupid, lazy, a daydreamer. And that happened through primary school. It happened in college. It happened in graduate school. It even happened for many years in my professional career. And at age 40, when I was diagnosed, the light bulb came on for me. And I realized then that the companies that I had started, that the success that I had seen was because of my dyslexia, not in spite of my dyslexia.
So tell us a little bit about that. How, because even this concept of peripheral thinking comes from your own experience, and then how you can teach this to other people that don't have dyslexia. So tell us a little about this journey.
So if you look at history and some of the greatest innovations that we've experienced throughout history, dyslexics are there. These people took their profession to the highest levels, and in some cases even created new industries. Einstein, Henry Ford, Anne Bancroft, Da Vinci, Agatha Christie, JFK, and the list goes on. The difference with dyslexia is our processing of written material. It's a learning difference. It's not a disease, and it's not a disability. Our mind takes in information that most people miss, and that assembles these pieces of information in unique ways. And as I was growing and starting businesses and working, I would find new ways to do things that were either more productive or more profitable or opened up new markets for my clients, for the companies. And as I learned more about my dyslexia after being diagnosed, I recognized that there is a set of super skills that come innately within people that have dyslexia. The ability to see things that others don't, apply unconventional approaches in order to overcome challenges, of course, but also to innovate beyond obstacles and see things well into the future that others could only imagine.
Because what sometimes is in front of us doesn't make sense, and we have to develop the muscle of looking to the context, looking to the patterns, looking to what is around, and find another way of going to A to B, and that expands that super skills.
That's exactly right. And when you find those experiences that take you on a different path to achieve the same goal, or perhaps even a greater goal than what was set out in the standard curriculum, you also experience things that you carry with you that can be applied in the future, or can be applied from what would likely be considered an irrelevant source. So I ask my audiences, and I'll ask yours, what does a baker in Bulgaria have in common with a foundry outside of Philadelphia? Well, what does a movie theater in Malaysia have in common with a distribution center in Denver? I don't know. What does a flu in China have to do with unemployment around the world? Well, conventional wisdom says they don't have anything in common, but peripheral thinking says, wait a minute, there may be some things here. There may be ideas that we can use. There may be experiences that we can draw upon. It's easier now for us to see the impact of a flu in China to unemployment around the world. At the moment, or even before that happened, it was almost inconceivable. Peripheral thinkers already considered what that might be and were preparing well in advance of something like that so that their companies or their profession or their families had options and alternatives for the unexpected.
Wow. Because interesting enough, before this conversation, I was looking to a video from the BBC that was like just less than 2 minutes about how trees communicate with each other. And what I'm thinking when you're describing that, because we see the trees as these individual beings next to each other, but separate, like you're describing, what the flu in China has to do with unemployment here, what the baker somewhere in another continent has to do with your own business. And we see these as separate things. But if you understand, like if the trees, they are finding out that the roots there is these fungi that communicate with each other, that establish this network, a complex network of communication. And if we see the world in this global way, and to see the patterns, how one thing influences the other, is incredible to see those connections. And how can we learn if we keep our mind open to the possibilities?
Exactly. And so if you're interested, I can do a quick session, 3 minutes with the audience participation, just to give them a sense of what it's like to see the world slightly differently.
So I will ask you 1 minute for that, because one thing that is also coming here for me is that seems like that the dyslexic brain is like prep for brainstorming. Yes, absolutely. And perhaps in ways that that most people might not consider brainstorming. We often equate brainstorming with creative ideas being drawn elegantly on whiteboards, and you walking away with a vision for the future that will be implemented immediately, sort of fantasizing or romanticizing that notion.
But brainstorming can happen with one individual who is referencing the perspectives of 1,000 people that they know.
Yeah. And it can be a messy process.
Yes, absolutely. It absolutely should be a messy process. Absolutely.
Because usually when it's not messy, possibly we are leaving many options on the table or not exploring many options.
100%.
And another thing here, because we are speaking about these super skills, but another thing that from what I'm learning from your work is that you really have a growth mindset about this. It's not we are born with it or not born with it. Some people maybe are wired in a certain way that makes this more innate in the beginning. That these super skills are teachable to everybody.
Absolutely. Yes, 100%. Because we have cracked the code. The World Economic Forum released a report a few years ago outlining their research. They researched every industry and every skill associated with that industry and defined what skills were needed for the year 2025 and beyond for each company in every industry to excel. Ernst & Young, the global consulting firm, along with a few others, looked at that report, filtered it, and studied it from a different perspective. There are 9 top skills that will be needed in the year 2025, and those 9 have the fewest number of people in the current working population to fill the need. So it's the highest demand and the fewest number of people to fill it. Ernst & Young found that 8 of the 9 are found innately within dyslexics.
Can you give us an example?
Yes. So there's a skill called interpreting. And there are different terms. Many people have studied dyslexia, but interpreting allows individuals to move outside of their industry's conventional wisdom or the industry's best practice. So they shed the notion that only our industry can solve our industry's problems. And they look for ideas and solutions everywhere and take those at face value. So, for instance, when JFK said, we're going to put a person on the moon by the end of the decade, conventional wisdom said, you're going to do what? Right? Well, peripheral thinking said, all right, let's go. NASA is exactly that. They said, let's get busy. And they cast a very broad net to capture information and ideas from nearly every industry around the world because they needed as much content as they could to make as many creations as possible as needed to do something that had never been done before.
And so that is really the core of innovation.
Yes. If you look at innovation throughout history, rarely will you find a unique property or element that was never involved in anything else before. So when I look at innovation, I'm always tapping into what's happening in other industries or what has happened in other industries. Texting, for instance, has been around for a long time. But in 2010, I worked with a hospital and in the Midwest, and we came up with the idea of texting patients. And it happened when I'd spoken with the director of the patient engagement department, and she went on vacation. She went on holiday to Hawaii. And she was only in Hawaii 4 or 5 hours when she called me on the phone and said, I have this idea about texting patients in the hospital, just like she had received a text from the hotel when she checked in. There it was, a proven solution, low risk. It's simply applied to a new industry with immediate results. And that was the beginning of that, quote, innovative approach to communicating with patients. It didn't use new technology. It was existing. It was just a different industry.
I love that she got inspiration about the hospitality industry in a hotel and applied to the hospitals.
That's exactly right. And it's it's fun to play on words, that same thing. But I've learned more from my baker friend in Bulgaria, Ivan, in the last 6 months than I ever expected. He owns 6 bakeries in Bulgaria, and we use Google Translate to communicate back and forth. And he's a lovely man with great experience that, frankly, could apply to virtually anyone that is listening to this podcast, whether it's business or personal.
So the baker in Bulgaria is not a fictitious character, is a real person.
It is. It's a real person. And you'll forgive me, especially if Ivan is listening to this translated. I'm sorry, I still cannot pronounce your last name. I simply cannot. But I was asked a couple of years ago, after giving that example, who I knew in Bulgaria. And I said, well, it's an example. And they said, you really don't have one? I said, oh my goodness, you're right. I need to. And that day, I got on LinkedIn and started looking around. And within 48 hours, I'd made a contact. And within a few weeks, we were talking. And I was learning from him. So, of course, I should take my own advice. Sometimes I don't. I'm human. But it's been a wonderful experience. And yes, I know somebody that owns a steel mill. It's not outside of Philadelphia. It's actually a foundry in a different part of Pennsylvania, but it's easier to say than Allentown.
Wow.
Yeah.
So give us the exercise now. So
yes,
like a taste of how people can start to develop these muscles.
Terrific. Okay. So for those of you that are listening, there'll be a part of our exercise that if you're listening while you're driving, do not do this. Just imagine. So imagine that you're standing in a mountain field and the sun feels warm on your face. The air, it's crisp and cool. And as you look out over that mountain field that's covered in wildflowers, in front of you, there's your challenge, rising up like a monolith out of the flowers. Now, this is the part, if you're driving, I'm asking you just to imagine this part. Take a hand and cover your eyes. Not completely, just so that you can't see what's right in front of you. Okay? So now, while you can't see what's right in front of you, what can you see? Well, you can move your eyes and you can look up or to the right, to the left, down. In fact, I challenge the people that are listening, find something in your environment that you haven't noticed before. You may be sitting in the same room that you've been in for decades. I promise you can find something that you haven't seen before. Okay, by now you will have found something, a shadow on the wall, a spot on the floor, something. All right, you can take your hand down. Now, that is peripheral vision, being able to kind of see things that are on your periphery. Now, look at that spot on the floor, the mark on the wall, a shadow on the ceiling, whatever that is that you saw that was new to you. What was in the peripheral vision is now clear because you see the details of it. That's peripheral awareness. We're back in the mountain field. And instead of looking at our challenge from our existing position, imagine you move 100 yards to the right. What does that new vantage point give you about that obstacle or that challenge? Well, likely you see more details, perhaps some shadows that show you how deep it is or how tall it is. You have different reference. And you can do that same thing, that same movement by going all the way around the obstacle in a circle, a 360-degree review. Very common, right? You can, if you lead teams, you can take your team on that same exercise. The challenge is that it's still from your perspective. You're looking at that obstacle still from your perspective, perhaps filtered through your team's collective experiences. This time, standing that 100 yards to the right of your original starting point, don't look at your obstacle. Look the other way. What do you see now? Well, likely you see other objects, maybe different terrain, and people. But those people aren't part of your team or your network or even your industry. And they've got their own challenges. They're not looking at yours. So how did they get where they are? And how do they achieve their goals? Their experiences may be just the inspiration you need for your company's innovation. It's those moments when you're in the mountain field using this peripheral thinking skill called interpreting, that you collect lessons and content and principles and solutions or pieces of solutions that you can apply anytime, anywhere. It's what dyslexics do naturally. What we hear and see always reminds us of something else. Our mind is like a secret database of wisdom. For peripheral thinkers that are not dyslexic, I've got a few tools. In fact, if anyone that's listening to this would like to have a copy of a workbook that outlines this interpreting skill, all you do is connect with me with the content that Anna has, and I'm happy, and just mention this show, and I'll send it to you free. I don't sell my list. I won't sell you anything, I promise, but I'm happy to help. Send that to you. I'd be happy to do that. And that's just a little taste of seeing things from a different perspective. And when you expand that and you see it from other people's perspectives, and those people see things from other people's perspectives, pretty soon your circle of experiences expands dramatically. And now you have access, just like NASA did, you start to have access to everything you need to achieve anything you want.
Love it. And I love that because you take it to the next level. It's not just going around the obstacle, is distance yourself looking in the other directions, mm-hmm. and connect with other people. And from that more global kind of perspective, then you can really see things, more possibilities.
Yes.
And I always like to the people that listen with regularly to the podcast, the Mindset Zone, to make like connecting the dots. And interesting.
Yes.
In the first year of recordings of this podcast, I did a couple of episodes. One was about the importance of keeping focus. Okay, execution, keeping the focus. And there is loads of high performance that speak about that. That immediately the next week, the episode was about the need of getting unfocus, of bringing that kind of just letting us wander, and we need both skills. And you are speaking about cultivating that unfocus capacity.
Yes, exactly. And the solution, this way of seeing things, is not a silver bullet. It is one of many things. You need to know about yourself. What is the mindset that you have? What are the things that limit your belief systems and things like that? I'm not speaking about that. I'm focusing just on the skills of peripheral thinking. And there are 8 of those that we don't have time to go through. But when you do expand that, keep in mind that, yes, I do have a baker in Bulgaria and a foundry outside of Philadelphia and so on. I also read books. Yes, as a dyslexic, I listen to books probably more often than read them, but that have nothing to do with my industry. I'm the chief revenue officer for a software company, as well as being the founder of Peripheral Thinkers, which is a think tank, and then do some speaking. But I'll read a book about diamond mining, mm-hmm. or see a documentary on jungle deforestation, or how a machine is made. And all of those things are lessons. I've got a friend who's retired that works at the Home Depot near my home. And his name is Mike. Shout out to Mike from the hardware aisle. He and I talk about every 2 weeks on a Saturday. And we talk about tools and things like that. But there are other things that he has in his 50-year career that are fascinating. And we talk about golf in Scotland and what it's like there. And if you open your mind, there's lessons everywhere, from the person who's handing you the coffee from your Starbucks through the window to going around the globe and meeting people, indigenous people in third world countries. There's so much available to you right where you are.
Yes, that being open to learning new things, to explore, and really to expand what's possible. Absolutely love it.
Yeah.
And another element here that is very interesting for me from the positive psychology angle is that when we are in a negative emotional state or anxiety, we literally see less. We see in a tunnel.
Yes.
Because it's the tiger, we have to get ready to run away kind of thing. And when we are in a positive, with positive emotions, more relaxed, we see really broaden. That is, even in positive psychology, is the build and broaden and build theory of positivity and positive emotions. And I see a parallel to what you are speaking. If people learn to tap into a more positive state, they are able to become more aware of their surroundings.
Absolutely. I have a rather interesting story, brief albeit, of being held at gunpoint in Nigeria. And you can imagine, it's the middle of the night, we were pulled out of a van, and the young man couldn't have been more than maybe 13 or 14 years old. I don't speak Ibibio. He didn't speak English. There was other people, they were yelling, and this poor young man is shaking, and he's holding a rifle to my head.
Wow.
Now, yes, definitely tunnel vision, but my peripheral thinking, I'm through my peripheral vision, I'm scanning everywhere. And I'm also keeping my eyes squarely on the young man who's shaking with his finger on the trigger.
Oh, gosh.
If only he had taken his finger off the trigger, I probably wouldn't have sweat so much. But and just showing, calm emotion, like, I understand this has got to be bad for you. I'm sorry for you, whatever's got you to this position. And at the same time, I'm scanning, because there are 4 of us that went to Nigeria for 2 weeks to on a mission trip to do some health things and medical missions, so on. It was very unexpected. But in that moment, I saw many, many things. And no, none of it was my life flashing before my eyes. It was, I saw escape routes. I saw a light coming from my left, which was a motorcycle coming from where we had just come from. I saw the jungle behind the young man. There were many things that I saw that I could use in that moment. 1, to calm myself, 2, to figure out if I could escape, 3, to determine whether or not this was it. And ultimately, it was not it, because you can hear me speaking
Yes.
now. Yeah.
Thank God.
Yeah.
But it's incredible. So where people can learn more about you, your work, and how can they start to explore the periphery or thinking and develop this awareness?
Yeah, terrific. Well, I'm happy to speak with anyone about this. So if you would just like to learn more about me, you can find me on LinkedIn, Paul Daniels Jr., Paul Daniels Jr. So it's www.linkedin.com/in/Paul Daniels Jr. You can also find me on my website at www.peripheralthinkers.com, or you can also use the www.pauldanielsjr.com. Both will get you to the same place. And if you're on LinkedIn and want to message me, please do. I'll be posting here in a few moments today about what I'm thinking about around peripheral thinking. If you're interested in having me speak at your event, if you go to the website that I gave you, there is a hold the date, and there's also a contact me page on that website. And I'm happy to respond and help however I can. That's my goal, is to be of service and to teach people another skill that they can add to their quiver so that they're more prepared for whatever comes next.
Love it. And I will make sure that all the links will show up below in the show notes here. So thank you so much for being here.
You're a gem, and it's been my pleasure. I love your show, and I think the world of you and what you do for your audience and your community. So the best to you and to everyone.
Grateful.
Expanding possibilities, the mindset zone.
Thank you for listening, and remember to visit mindset.zone. Yes, instead of .com, it's .zone. There you can find all the episodes and other amazing resources, all at mindset.zone. As always, I'm so grateful you are here. Expand what's possible for you, for the ones around you, for the world.